Hello, everyone, and welcome to another engaging episode of Critical Mass TV. I want to give a big thank you to Jeremy Harpel and the Aerolites for the use of that song. So, a big thank you, Jeremy. This is the show that never hesitates to ask the question and does its best to help form the honest answer. Some mixed mental arts for intellectual self-defense. It's Sunday, November 10th, 2013, and we are broadcasting live from the VCAM studios tonight, so don't hesitate to call in and give us your feedback. The phone number is 651-0589. Critical mass is the fewest number of people it takes to change the world, so let's get a move on. My name is Brad Hartley, and I take full responsibility for any and all of my wide and ranging opinions. These opinions are not necessarily those of our wonderful guests or the station, even though they should be. We have 3 segments to the show tonight. Eye on the Greed Cult with yours truly. Then second, Art Break with Cathy will be an exploration of graffiti and street art. And for Voices VT tonight, I will discuss the broadening scope of 350vermont.org with Jade Walker. Okay, let's open the eye. Even though the truth is everywhere, it hides in plain sight. For thousands of years, a tiny ruling elite has dominated and owned every society on earth. Their success has been staggering. The wealth and incomes of the top 1% have grown by many trillions of dollars. The corporations owned by these folks own the politicians and the military and have no intention of sharing anything as they process away the Earth's life support systems. The incomes of working people, however, after growing every decade since the 1830s, have, since 1970, been on a steady march downhill. Using the corporate media and a very compliant education system, all the world's problems are blamed on the poor and working people, even though we've never had any real power or the ability to control policy in any way. Even in the more liberal of America's 2 corporatist parties, it's structurally impossible for those most affected by policy to have any input in forming those policies. I mean, when is the last time you participated in a critical decision-making committee? Has anyone even ever asked you anything? It doesn't have to be this way. Politics is the never-ending struggle for power, and any organized force can get a seat at the table if they do it with honesty, integrity, and determination. I think it's safe to say that letting giant authoritarian brain mills control what we do isn't working. What can we do? Here's a little brainstorming session that you're invited to, and just a few things that occurred to me. First point, identify the Achilles heels of the greed cult and then do the opposite. Most importantly, organize. It's always better to spar with power as a group than by yourself. Don't feed the monster. By investing with Wall Street or overspending on cheap foreign imports, you are voting for your own demise. Just say no. Thanks, Nancy. But just say no. Be honest. Think about the relationship between honesty and honorable behavior. Taking the low road never leads to the promised land. Require a burden of proof. See how conventional thought stands up under scrutiny. Reject violence as a solution to problems. Violence is always a sign of weakness. It's never a sign of strength. It means one has given up on our higher attributes like reason and humility and resolving conflicts. Help support an honest media and communication system. Compare Pacifica's Democracy Now! With narrow-minded, self-serving, victim-blaming crap from Fox News and ask yourself, who would I rather party with? Organize with your natural allies. People of any color in your economic class are your best hope. If you sidle up to the greed cult, you're asking to be owned. Join local groups working for justice. You'll be surprised how deeply you can be involved in planning and action. Support alternate economies. Operating parallel of the giant uncaring corporations with less destructive, locally sourced alternatives strikes right at the heart of the monster. The farmer's market is a political powerhouse. Reduce your support for corporatist pseudo-democracy. Note that Bernie Sanders is a powerful voice of reason within the system. He's making a large impact without blindly sucking up to power. Strengthen your intellectual self-defense. Try to determine if what you hear is corporatist or ruling class propaganda, or is it meaningful, empowering information? Ask yourself, if I buy in, who benefits and who pays for my loyalty? Realize that everyone is special, unique, and exceptional. We are not great just because we are we. It's what we do that's important. Work to build a personal culture of dignity and respect. It will migrate into all of your pursuits. Get radicalized. Look for the root causes of issues. Learn to follow the money. In a society that is completely based on greed, you don't have far to look. Speak truth to power every day. Even if you just rant at the talking heads on the big screen, any practice will liberate your soul like no self-serving self-help class ever did. After reason, imagination is our second greatest attribute. The sheer fact that we can imagine a better, more just world makes it possible. And education is not an end unto itself. Keep learning and teaching. We're all very capable. Demand honesty. Being brutally honest is only brutal because of built-in hypocrisy and contradictions in capitalism. Greed lies, but the truth should never hurt. Help people around you with their worldview. Deconstruct and reconstruct. It's painful to realize that what's right is wrong and some wrongs are right. It can be a painful, but it's always a wonderful process. Don't be blindly obedient to undemocratic and anti-democratic organizations. If someone's telling you to just be quiet and sit there and obey while they handle all of your affairs for you, and only after you die will you get to a better place, you're probably getting hoodwinked. You should only be affected by policies and ideas equal to your input in deciding the policy or forming the idea. Remember, some authority is illegitimate. A classical libertarian believes that no layer of authority is self-justifying. And please, don't be a right-wing working person. A right-winger supports greed and violence as a salvation. It's easy to see that long-term truth and justice, honesty and respect are a much better foundation. It ain't the giant right-wing conspiracy, it's the giant right-wing mainstream that'll bite you in the ass. Finally, keep your sense of humor. Remember, if it wasn't funny, it would just be true. Okay, last time we were together, I was exploring the realities of the privatized Pentagon. So, in the Are You Freaking Kidding Me segment, I think I will continue and try to summarize some of the points I made. War profiteers in the past were understood to be a problem. Why would these big companies ever want permanent war to end? What group of rational people would let the greed cult decide who lives and who dies? Is permanent war for profit guaranteeing terroristic revenge off into the future? Does anyone really believe that these multi-trillion-dollar death merchants are ever going to say, okay, folks, the war's over, you can have your tax money and pissant social programs back? Sustainable to a weapons manufacturer means never-ending industrial war for profit. Are you frickin' kidding me? So, Halliburton and KBR. Just a quick point about Uncle Dick Cheney's buddies in those corporations. In Iraq, Pentagon auditors, rare though they may be, found $100 loads of laundry and $45 cases of soda to be the norm, not the exception. And on and on and on. The list is endless in that report. Senator Ted Coburn, Republican from Oklahoma, released a report last year recommending the savings of $67 billion by eliminating Pentagon-branded beef jerky, Pentagon-run microbreweries, and smartphone apps. Literally, they have one that tells soldiers when to take their coffee breaks. In an internal report published by Mother Jones magazine, the privatized military wasted $296 billion in 2008 alone, over twice the military budget of China and more than the $281 billion of the expenditures of the combined European Union. Where are the right-wing T-nuts of small government and fiscal responsibility? Are they crazy or misinformed or completely bought out? Oh yeah, all their funding comes from right-wing billionaires. The day before the government shut down, the Pentagon awarded an unprecedented 94 contracts totaling about $5 billion in one day. Has anyone ever heard the one about the fox guarding the hen house? How about Fox News guarding the hen house? The fear-mongering and propaganda is effective, I grant you that. But if I can sit here and try to promote a little bit of self-defense through some mixed mental arts of procuring meaningful information, then actually thinking about it, you can do it too. So just a really quick note, I just found this press release about Norwich University was awarded recently over $10 million in contracts through the Pentagon. It's about digital vulnerability and the unprecedented vulnerability of our digital systems. some would say that might be a house of cards of our own making, but so world actors, which I guess means other countries, will respond to US cyber attacks and spying. I guess that's a given. Cadets at Norwich have been contracted to study methods of protecting the financial services industry, which is Wall Street. It is estimated that the 5 largest Wall Street firms have $10 trillion in assets, 10,000 billion dollars. I wonder if they could afford to pay for their own research. The US is spying and attacking and subverting at record rates with digital technology, even diddling with our own supposed allies. Maybe there's a little self-fulfilling prophecy here. Okay, we could talk endlessly about the Pentagon system and the sellout to the corporate sector, but that's going to be it for tonight. So in a few moments, we will be back with Art Break, and let's see what Cathy has for us today. Thanks, and we'll be right back.
Hi there, and welcome again to Art Break. This is a show where I focus on local Vermont creative artists, musicians, photographers, writers. I usually have a guest, but today I don't have one. I decided to talk about a very interesting subject that it sometimes makes people uncomfortable. It's the gritty subject of graffiti. Graffiti. The word is derived from the Italian word graffito, which means a scribbling or scratching on buildings or walls. These scribblings can be found on the walls of Pompeii. Romans wrote on the walls of cities when they conquered the cities. And there are cave drawings from as far back as 40,000 years ago that have been discovered in Spain and France. Another subject I hope to discuss in my next segment. I'm hoping to have a guest who's been to France and seen the cave drawings. So what is graffiti? Vandalism? Art? A statement? An expression? An outlet? What is it saying? What does it look like to you? Opinion about graffiti is anything from obscene, distasteful destruction to a representation of a social movement and culture. And starting around 1982, one of the hottest art movements. Have you ever stopped at a railroad crossing and watched a train go by with graffiti on every car? Do you wonder who did it or what it means? Or do you just see it with no specific opinions? Graffiti writers are a subculture. The graffiti writers started what is called tagging over 40 years ago in New York City as a neighborhood activity. Tagging is a stylized writing of a person's name or tag. Tag can be a symbol. Each person had his or her own tag. Without it, they weren't taken seriously. Tagging became a competitive contest, tagging buildings and trains. Tags became larger and more elaborate until they started to become full murals. This was all referred to as street hip-hop because it developed at the same time as the hip-hop dance and music cultures. Then the hip-hop culture explosion in the 80s spread westward through major US cities and then into Europe. Graffiti subcultures grew in European cities like Amsterdam, London, Vienna, etc. People studying graffiti have categorized it into 3 categories: junk, gang, and tagging. Junk refers to messages that are racist, threatening, and are obscene. Gang, well, that's graffiti that gangs did contests, and often they turned into rivalries that erupted into fights and even shootings. Tagging, which is kind of what I'm mostly talking about, comes from all ethnic groups and all social classes, and is also the stylized signature of the tagger. That's mostly what I'll be talking about tonight. So much of the early urban graffiti was done in the urban environment, of course, on buses, buildings, trains, alleys, and those were the canvases they used. And spray paint was the main medium. It was easily portable, cheap, available, and not very environmentally friendly, but it was the easiest thing to get. And you could get all the colors and no cleanup. So youth is another huge factor in the rise of graffiti. It's important for young people to find their identity and the meaning of life. We all go through it. How are young people able to let their voices be heard? How does a young person growing up in poverty get a message out to the mainstream? They would normally be restricted from groups who shape social policy. Thus, many young people's voices emerge on the margins of society. Established political beliefs, conformism, social convention, that doesn't seem to make changes for the better. But it does create rebels, resistors, and subcultures. These subcultures are the creators of the underground music, underground publications, underground art, computer hacking, and often a change in society. Subcultures are always formed as a reaction to a dominant culture. Subcultures form to escape social control, to form a sense of freedom. They unify as a group and identify with each other. They unify to satisfy an unsatisfactory condition. Dick Hebdige, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right, a media theorist and a sociologist who studies subcultures, has written several books on the subject, wrote, "Powerful people construct places where they can exercise power," meaning cities, shopping malls, schools, and houses. But the weak occupy them and make these places their own. And to me, therein lies the key. The powerful, whose identities are synonymous with money, versus the powerless, who find identity within their subculture, one being graffiti. So a new type of graffiti has risen out of all of this as political messages in more public places, communicating ideas against mainstream establishment. These messages reach a huge viewing audience. They contain messages by people who would have no other way to let their voices be heard. People have a lot to say about subjects like political power, freedom, labor conditions, civil rights, unemployment, religion, racism, a quest for identity, alternative lifestyles, and even love and humor. Graffiti writers, and recently called graffiti artists, can make a name for themselves in that world. It gives them a sense of importance, of self-worth. It says that they are part of this world, even if the graffiti is illegal and dangerous. The subject of being illegal and dangerous and exciting is one that would take longer to talk about. And the whole illegal adrenaline rush, creating your art and rushing away so you don't get caught by the law is part of graffiti, but I'm not going to focus on that right now. I'm focusing more on the artistic part of it. In researching the subject of graffiti, I discovered that most taggers respect property that is historical in nature, meaning old buildings, monuments, and actual nature. There are always exceptions, and that's considered more like vandalism. So tagging may not be considered art per se, but as the graffiti gets more colorful, more detailed, larger, more elaborate, more complicated, simpler even, it's more artistic and appealing to more people. So graffiti has now become part of our common culture and is gaining a lot of recognition in the art community. It's been shown in galleries in London, New York City, LA, and now there are famous graffiti artists. But is it still graffiti, or has it jumped the fence into the field of art? It has definitely undergone a movement of change, and some would say has now started to be exploited. It's not unusual for subculture styles to get adopted by mass culture for commercial purposes. Businesses often capitalize on subcultures in their quest for cool. The tools have changed also, going from spray paint cans to stencils and stickers, the latter of which can be used quickly for the speedy escape from the scene, because it is usually still illegal, leaving a completed work and keeping the anonymity. And I'm going to show you some pictures right now. On this camera right over here. And so the first one I'm going to show you is just basically a picture. It's a little blurry here. Well, that's just basically what graffiti looks like, the older styles. Okay? Here's another one in color, and that's more of a graffiti, an older style. This one here is a very small picture. I'm hoping the camera can zoom in, but it's of a whole wall in a city filled with graffiti. It just shows you how many people are really into it. It's pretty cool. So the next one I'm going to show you is one that is much more specific. It says, Jesus, the Prince of Peace. And so it's not always about things that are controversial. Well, I suppose religion is controversial, but sometimes people have a definite statement that they want to say. A lot of times they do. And now there are some famous artists, street artists. I'll name a few. This one is by a man, I'm assuming, yes, it is a man, named Hayuro. He's an Argentinian-born street artist, and his images are full of movement. They're just beautiful. I've seen 7 or 8 of these images, and they're amazing. Just, it's art. It's on the street, it's on buildings, it's on fences, whatever, but it is so creative. Here's another one. This is on several pieces of stone. This is by an artist, street artist, I should say, named Roa. He differs from some other street artists in that he gives the viewer multiple perspectives of his animal subjects. Here's another one. This one is a piece in Spain. It's of 2 men riding a huge fish, and you have to stand in a specific spot to see the picture come together as one whole picture. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. This man's name is Laguna, or that's the name he goes under. And so here is one by an artist who calls himself Above. And there's a quote from him. It says, "When I was in Lisbon, Portugal 3 months ago, I would walk by this homeless lady who was begging for money every day." And you can see her right here. "I found it sadly ironic that just 6 feet away, there was an ATM machine where people were literally lining up to withdraw their money. And in this stencil, this is a stencil depicting rich and poor. He's stealing from the rich, and he's giving the money to this poor woman. And his name is right here, it says above. Pretty cool. Talk about a statement. I'm going to keep showing this while I discuss a few others. There's somebody named C215 who paints local faces to reflect the personality of a city. There's somebody named Mental Gassy. He does wheat paste images in crazy places like sides of city fences. There's somebody named Spy, who's famous for very different medium. He does 3D installations. He did, the one that I saw was a basketball hoop, and in the basketball hoop was a huge flower pot with a flower. Just fun, very humorous. And there's another artist, there's hundreds of people doing this now, named Tiki Freak. He has Japanese ancestry and painted in the streets of Osaka for 3 months. He did a lot of huge koi fish. Here's another, one of the most famous artists, and his name is Banksy. A lot of people have heard of Banksy. And he's removed the ing in park, and now he has park like a fun park, and he has stenciled on a wall a girl swinging, and you can see how big this is with all the cars that are in the parking lot. And I love this picture a lot. I think it's very cool. So then here's another couple images by Banksy. This one's really, really neat. He uses a lot of stencils. And this one, let me fix this here, depicts a painter who was supposedly painting lines in a street right here. And it goes up here, and all of a sudden it goes up onto the wall. And this is the painter. And he has a roller that he apparently, you know, in the story of this picture, painted. And so this is a real person walking by, but this is very realistic. He uses shadows and everything like that. So it looks like the man was painting a line in the street, and he decided to whoop up into the wall and paint this huge flower and then sit there. And it's quite believable. Banksy is kind of a thoughtful, he thinks a lot about what he's going to put up. This one here I love. It says, "Keep your coins, I want change." And it's another stencil. So he does these stencils, he takes a lot of time and gets things ready before he puts them up in the street. I love this one here. This is so cool. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's V-H-I-L-S, Vils. He's a Portuguese-born artist, not as famous as many others. He uses power drills and chisels and various paints. He uses drills and chisels. I mean, that's just crazy. He literally scratches the surface of buildings to create his masterpieces. And I like this method because hopefully he gets permission before he does this, which turns into, is it art or is it graffiti? But this brings me back to that original word graffito, which means to scratch and chisel into walls and buildings. This piece is in Moscow, Russia. It's very impressive. It's beautiful. Yeah. So now also, graffiti has collided with technology. This is some cool, fun stuff. Someone invented LED lights that stick on a surface. And when you throw them, they're called throwies. When you throw them, they stick on the surface. And you can even take a stick, line them up, put them on a surface, take the stick away, and they stay there. And they're LED lights, so they can come down. It's not as destructive as spray paint and chiseling into a building. There's another new technologically cool graffiti art. It's laser tag graffiti. It's tagging using a laser beam and software. The tagger can take his beam of light and reach over a river to a bridge or a building and just write the name on a building, and it's computer operated, so he can just click the light off, but the name stays on the building for a while, and then he clicks it off, writes something else, click it off. So that's cleaner graffiti. And there's another fun thing you can do on the web, excuse me, by an inventive guy who believes the web should be free and open to everyone, which I think so too. It's a screen reader, and you sign the screen with your name, and it gets connected to everyone else by a little line to everyone else who writes their names. And so whoever signs it, you're connected with everyone else all over the world who signs it. His name is Evan Roth. Excuse me. Excuse me. And you can Google like Evan Roth for markup, and it'll bring you to his website, and he explains how to do it. There's another cool graffiti called reverse graffiti. Basically, you can take a filthy area and wipe it and scratch it, and it's sort of a takeaway, and you can create a beautiful work of art, sort of like a sculptor with a piece of marble can carve away and end up with a beautiful piece. You can do that with taking away dirt. You can put a stencil on a wall and wash away the dirt, take it away, and you're not creating a dirt or filth, you're taking it away. I saw a video where a man went into a long subway station, and he started to create with a bucket and water and a rag, and he started to wash away skull images, hundreds of them. And then in the next part of the video, it shows that he kind of got busted, and there's a guy there with a hose and just hosing it all away, because it's just dirt that he turned into skull images, and it was very, very interesting. Finally, I'd like to say that I delved into this subject thinking that graffiti has evolved into an art form. But what it really does is it tells a story of an era. It tells a story much like music does, or food, or automobiles, or clothing, even movies. They all talk about what the era is going through at that time, what people are interested in. And also, much of this information was gleaned from a Dutch student named Silva Petriosanti, who did her master thesis on graffiti, and it was fascinating. I just got so into it. So now, in closing, I'd like to say that Brad is coming back with Voices Vermont with his special guest, Jade Walker from 350vermont.org. And peace out. Here's Brad.
Have you read the news? Have you let it get you? Yeah, people there are saying how bad you're gonna get. And I've been calling to the sky, please don't let more bullets fly. Have you heard the
Hello, everybody. We are back. I can tell what Cathy's going to have me doing on the way home. We're going to be tagging stuff. So this is Voices Vermont. And again, I'm Brad Hartley. I'd like you to introduce Jade Walker. She will be our guest this evening. And she is tar sands field organizer at 350 Vermont. Welcome, Jade.
Thank you.
I'm glad you could make it. You are quite welcome. So, Jade, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you eventually to 350 Vermont?
Yeah, I lived in the Northeast Kingdom in a cabin that I built with some good friends, and I feel very passionate about the community in the kingdom as well as the land in the kingdom. And my cabin is in Wheelock. And before that, I was working in Philadelphia. I ran an urban education farm for about 10 years in Philadelphia, and I've been committed to doing food justice work and prison rights organizing, and racial justice work in general is really what calls my heart to this work. Mm-hmm. And my connection to the land in the kingdom really inspired me to work with 350 Vermont on this campaign.
Wow, you have quite a history, personal history of activism. Yeah. That's neat. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
So, can you tell us a little bit about, what's the deal with tar sands and tar sands oil? And what is it? Can you give us just a little bit of a background on the the importance of why we should all care about tar sands?
Yeah, so it seems like it's in the news a lot, this reference to tar sands and to the XL pipeline in particular is really getting a lot of media coverage. And I think it's, just to begin, it's a misnomer. It doesn't have to do with tar. It's actually bitumen, which is a solid or semi-solid petroleum deposit in the ground based in Alberta, Canada, which is the Athabasca River Basin. And it's a mixture of sand and water and clay. And the way that they are trying to ship it through these pipelines is to dilute it with natural gas and a number of other additives, products, benzene and other things. And while they're doing the refining process, there's a pretty huge byproduct which is called petrol coke, and they call it pet coke, which is like coal except denser and more carbon intensive, and it's super dangerous and damaging to burn. This byproduct, although of course they want to make money off of everything, and so they're selling it to countries with less environmental regulations, which is devastating to think about. And also then so the bitumen can't be refined in a regular refinery process. You need a special refining process to deal with it. And so there's a lot of the regulations that they're seeking in Canada in particular are around building these refineries and having the processing plants at different places, and they're having to seek a number of different approvals, regulations and approvals to get that. I should say that the way that they're extracting it is either about 20% of it is being extracted through a process of strip mining, and about 80% of it is being extracted through a process of fracking, with not with water, which is what many people are familiar with in the US, but with a process of steam, super, super hot steam and a mixture of chemicals being shot into the ground in order to extract this. And so they're working in like overnight pace, trying to get this oil out of the ground and as fast as they possibly could, and then shipping it as fast as they can. And so they've been using rail as a primary way, but they're really looking to expand these pipelines. And I say they, meaning Enbridge, which is the company that's owned by ExxonMobil and TransCanada in Canada, and the version of that in the US is what we see as the Portland Pipeline Company, and there's all these subsidiaries, but it's very much owned by ExxonMobil, it is not ever going to be some mom and pop fuel source. And just to say also in Canada, so that they've been doing this process of fracking and of strip mining up there. And there is also, though, at the same time as they're working at this epic pace to get this oil out of the ground, there's also been an amazing amount of resistance happening up there. The Idle No More campaign was initiated around the Trans-Canada and the XL pipeline, which is an amazing coalition of Native people and allies doing blockades, doing campaigns, doing direct actions all over. And also there's a great partnership or coalition between environmental organizers and union folks. So like the Alberta Federation of Labor is working with the environmental people, and I think a lot of times we look back at these environmental justice issues and see that they pit people against the labor and around like, oh, we're going to create more jobs, we're going to create more jobs, and that's why this is going to be okay. And I think,
or you're going to lose jobs
right,
if you don't go along
right,
with it.
Right, or you're going to lose jobs. So I think that like looking at these partnerships that are being formed between environmental groups and unions is particularly inspiring to me as well.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And just on the note of Idle No More, I think it's also important to realize and to recognize that this pipeline is going, is within 50 miles of 150 different First Nations communities, and goes through 12 different reservations in Canada, and hundreds of miles of the pipeline go through native land in the U.S., and that this is like very much also part of this targeted colonialism that has gone on for far too long, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's sort of the background of what we're talking about when we're talking about tar sands up in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, so the pipeline that we're talking about, I think Trailblazer, is that sort of like their internal code name for it. So that's a pipeline basically then would be from Alberta, Canada, through around the Great Lakes region, and then it actually passes through the Northeast Kingdom and Vermont, and then it makes its way to Portland, Maine.
Well, if you look at the map of it, it looks like a maze of different lines going all over that. And so so it comes through, so it's in Montreal, and it goes through to Portland, Maine, which is the piece that goes through the Northeast Kingdom is that piece. And I should say that there's 3 pipelines currently going through the Northeast Kingdom. One, I can go into more detail on them, but one is already currently shipping crude oil from Portland to Montreal. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about this campaign and the way that it's going to affect Vermont is talking about a reversal of this pipeline.
So reversing the flow from Montreal or from Canada southward to Portland.
Right. So what happens now is the oil comes in from overseas, comes into South Portland in the port, and gets loaded into this pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
and with the use of a lot of pressure, gets pumped to Montreal.
So crude oil to satisfy demand up there.
That's crude oil.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are, so just backing up 1 second, from Alberta, they're trying to get, like I said, the oil out of the ground as fast as possible, and so it's looking like pipelines going through the center of the country, the XL pipeline we see going all the way to Texas, we see lines going through the Midwest, lines going to Utah. I mean, there's like a ton of different lines that they're trying to match up, and they have to get permits for each various line, and so there's resistance at each line point, because it's like if we can resist this section of it, then they're not going to be able to connect Sarnia to Montreal, or something like this. And so
they're relatively desperate. The companies and corporations that are involved are relatively desperate to get this bitumen, whatever slurry product, to the coast.
Right.
So that seems almost like they're going to export that product, not really use it for our domestic use.
Right. I think a lot of the language that has been used is very much like, oh, this is going to, offset all of this international oil, and this is going to help us domestically. And I think it's really incorrect that why would they be looking for all of these port towns to have this oil be going to if it was for domestic use. And I think there was even recently an article, I'm not sure which paper it was in, but it was an AP paper about how the head of TransCanada even talking about that, oh yeah, this is actually a lot more for export than we're looking at internally.
One thing that's kind of crazy, like the price of a barrel of oil now is falling dramatically, and I know the price on some of this tar sand oil is now, I think it was even down around $50 a barrel, which it hasn't been that way for a long time. So as the world oil price falls, it makes it less and less economically viable. So that raises the level of desperation to get this stuff into the marketplace.
Totally, totally, and they are doing everything they can very sneakily. I want to speak to the vote that just happened in South Portland. So in South Portland, there was a people-led effort to change the zoning regulations of their waterfront. What happened was the Citgo and Irving and American Petroleum and all of these large oil conglomerations started launching a counter campaign to this people-led effort, and they actually ended up dumping about $600,000 into this counter campaign. The Waterfront Protection Ordinance would have stopped these two 70-foot tall smokestacks that the Portland Pipeline Company wanted to build in the South Portland area. The only reason to build these two giant smokestacks would be to off-gas a lot of the byproduct of tar sands. There's no other reason why you would need a 70-foot tall smokestack, never mind two of them, in your port town where you're already dealing with oil.
To process it a little bit maybe before it went onto tankers or whatever.
So it was all about burning off the emissions of tar sands in order to export it. The whole time they're saying, this isn't for tar sands, this isn't for tar sands. And they even pulled their permit to have tar sands there. I mean, they really were trying to send this mixed message to people, being like, no, we really need these smokestacks, but it's not for tar sands. And people weren't fooled, and they led this amazing citizen-led effort. I got to be a part of it. I got to go door knocking with them for a weekend, and they knocked on thousands and thousands of doors, really trying to get people to turn out for the vote. The vote happened last Tuesday. Unfortunately, the people lost, so and they lost by less than 200 votes. And I will say it was like a real show of what that big money does. And they essentially, the oil companies paid about $135 per vote that they got, based on all the figures of the counter campaign. And it's what an incredible effort the people of South Portland did. And I see that as directly connected to the work that we're doing here in Vermont, because if tar sands is approved and can get processed in South Portland, it will go through the line that goes through the Northeast Kingdom. So we are all connected, our struggles are all united, and this pipeline is drawing a clear line between them. And so the more we can support each other and the more we can stay informed on what's happening in each other's communities, I think.
Right, because the long view of history, as we look back, the reckless burning of fossil fuels is probably going to be one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made. And then not controlling, when we realize that it's getting dangerous, we're actually increasing our burning, not pulling back. So
devastating.
So Jade, so what are some of the risks of reversing the flow of this pipeline? So we're going to be sending this slurry, sand, oily, whatever it is, mix through this antique pipeline, I guess before they build new ones or whatever. So what is kind of like the risk of doing that for the Northeast Kingdom and just for Vermont and other areas where it passes through?
So in the Northeast Kingdom, there's 3 pipelines that run through North Troy, Irisburg, Newport, Barton, Sutton, Burke, Victory, Lunenburg, and Guildhall. Those are the towns that it runs through. Okay. But as far as we're talking about watersheds, it's pretty much all of the watersheds in the Northeast Kingdom would be affected if there was a spill. So the 3 pipelines, there's a 12-inch pipe. Not to get into too much of the dates here, but I think it is important to understand what we are talking about. So there's a 12-inch pipe that was built in 1941 and was decommissioned in 1984. So that pipe is no longer working. There's an 18-inch pipe which was built in 1950, so 62, 63 years ago, which is essentially on what they call mothballs, which means that it holds liquid nitrogen right now, which is helping to not have so much corrosion happen on that pipe. That pipe was only filled with the liquid nitrogen in 2011, so very recently. Before that, prior to that, it had been used between Portland and Montreal, and it had been reversed a number of times. So the flow reversal contributes to a lot of the corrosion that pipes experience. And if people are
corroding it on the inside.
Right. And that was just with regular crude oil.
Right.
And if people are familiar with the pipe that broke in Kalamazoo, Michigan, it was essentially the exact same pipe. It was the same size, and it was the same age we're talking about here. And this exact pipe, the 18-inch pipe that goes through the Northeast Kingdom, has spilled twice before, once in 1950 up in Quebec and once in 1999 in Quebec as well, and that was immediately following a reversal. And then there's also a 24-inch pipe that was built in 1965, which is the pipe that is currently transporting crude oil from Portland to Montreal. So those are the 3 pipes we're talking about.
Okay.
Most likely the pipe that if they were going to do a reversal, they would do it on the 18-inch pipe. That's what everyone is suspecting, although they are being very shady and there's no information being put forward.
Yeah, the recent maintenance and the filling with liquid nitrogen and all that, that's prepping something to be put in.
Right.
They don't spend money. So we only have a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
So I want you to talk to the viewers a little bit about what the resistance in Vermont looks like right now and how can interested people get involved.
So there is a people-led campaign based in the Northeast Kingdom right now, although we are doing it statewide, where we're trying to pass resolutions on town meeting day. And to say that we want to keep Vermont tar sands free and tar sands will not come through that town. And we are hoping that every town in the Northeast Kingdom can pass these resolutions this year. We're really doing a lot of educational outreach around this. If you want to have an event in your town and learn more about what would happen if there was a spill, what a reversal means, what rivers would be affected, what watersheds would be affected, that would be something we would be very interested in doing. We have a working group of folks just doing educational work. We also have folks prepping people on how to get a resolution in your town. So you need 5% of the registered voters in your town to sign a petition that we have a copy of, and of course, every town is welcome to shift around the language of the petition to fit for your town, but to sign the petitions by the end of January to get it on the ballot for voting for the resolutions.
So can people find 350 Vermont on the web?
Yeah, and you can email me, Jade at 350vt.org. You can also go to the 350 Vermont website, and we're building a website special for the Keep Vermont Tar Sands Free campaign, which is a coalition of a number of different groups.
That was it. You got it all in there too. That was awesome. Good for you.
Did I?
Tell me about you.
That was a lot.
You